Hi, everyone. I'm Lady C, and today I'm sitting down with someone who spent 40 years as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. She's here to share her journey, the highs, the struggles, and how she finally found freedom and healing. I'm honored to have her with me, and I know her story will connect with so many of you. Let's get started. Maya, welcome to Hidden Struggles.
Hi, Lady C. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. This is going to be an excellent discussion. You and I have been talking about so many things before we actually got into the interview. And so, what I'd like to do, first of all, is just kind of introduce you to my audience. And so, can you just give us a little bit of background and detail about who you are and, what your life was like growing up in the religion known as Jehovah's Witnesses?
Okay, great. So maybe I'll start with what I'm doing right now. I'm a mother of two. I'm married for almost 20 years. In 2023, I started my own mental health therapy practice. So I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I specialize in treating clients who are dealing with anxiety disorders, like generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder. So that's where I'm at now. I have not been to a Kingdom Hall in over 6 years, and I'm feeling great. Okay.
Well, that's a good, and I think a lot of people feel the same way after they leave and wake up and they're no longer there. Do you want to kind of talk about, what got you into the practice of mental health?
Sure. I grew up as a witness. My mother started studying the Bible with Jehovah's Witnesses when I was about one. My father is never a witness. I was a very anxious child. I didn't realize it at the time, but I probably could have been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder probably from middle school as a child. I used to just be afraid of many, many different things. I was afraid of weather. I was afraid of meeting new people. I used to have a lot of problems with my stomach. I would feel sick in my stomach. I spent a lot of days laying in the nurse's office because of fear and anxiety and worry. So I kind of carried that with me. And then growing up as a Jehovah's Witness, my mother was very strict. She was, like a new Jehovah's Witness. She didn't have generations of witnesses behind her. She had found this religion through friends, you know? And so the religion itself, the doomsday prophecies, they all triggered me terribly. I used to have nightmares about Armageddon and things like that.
Were you the only child in your family?
No, I have just one sister.
Okay. Did she have any issues like this as well?
She also was very anxious. I think her anxiety was mostly social anxiety. She was extremely shy,
Okay.
so much so that kids didn't think she talked when she was in elementary school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So when you think about it, it's like when you go to a movie and the movie is either PG, PG-13, rated R, right?
Right.
So your mother is actually raising her children who should be watching G-rated movies, but she has you in a rated R as it is to ghosts and goblins, if you want to say. So and that's with not explaining why you're learning that, right? Now, while your mother's doing all this with Jehovah's Witnesses, what is your father doing?
My father was, he was not a religious person at all, and he just let my mom do whatever she wanted to do. So we two kids, we went with her to the Kingdom Hall. She eventually became a pioneer. He did not really get involved that much. When we were young, he was what they would call opposed, right? And he used to be very angry. He believed it was a cult that we were in. But at some point, probably when I was 14 or 15, he just kind of dropped it, I think, to keep the peace. And that's
Hmm.
how that happened. Yeah.
Right.
You're saying my mother was very, I think because she had lived a difficult life when she was young. And I think she regretted some of her decisions. So she tried to keep us as sheltered as possible. So, in addition to just being regular Jehovah's Witnesses, we were very isolated. We were home alone a lot. We didn't really interact that much with, other people from even the congregation. There was just a sense that everything was unsafe, and that Satan was lurking everywhere, and I don't think we realized, my sister and I, how sheltered and isolated that we were.
Yeah. That was the whole thing, because I was that kid. I was not that kid in terms of being sheltered to the point that you were, but I was the kid that, saw the dragon, the woman drive, riding on the dragon's back, and
Yes.
Armageddon and Great Tribulation. I was that scary kid. So I totally understand what you went through with that fear factor. And unfortunately, my mom didn't just keep talking Jehovah's Witness stuff to me. I just got it from the platform. But your mom, she preached it from home as well?
Yes, she really tried to follow everything by the book, like even having us do family Bible study, right? We could never watch any rated R movies. We had to like watch out for different young people in the congregation if she felt like they weren't, good enough. Like she was by the book. Yeah.
And like I said, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. Your mother would not let you watch rated R movies, but you were living a rated R life through a sci-fi movie, through a sci-fi lens. Because kids, that's part of the whole thing about something being rated R. If it's something as scary as what you were going through, you shouldn't even have been living that. I mean, because that's what really messes up kids, is that we don't understand all these gloom and doom things that they're putting at us. And the Watchtower had a lot of that going on, you
It was
know?
terrible. I feel like especially in the 80s, the pictures were just crazy, with the harlot, and blood everywhere. So
Yeah.
funny, I didn't recognize it until I had my own kids. When I had my own kids, I remember my husband and I tried to like study the Bible study book with them, the Bible story book with them. And then like a couple stories in, we were like, this is crazy. We can't show this to these kids. They don't want to see all this death.
See? Yeah. And so they really run and when you get somebody as a young child, you really can mess them up like that. So when you think about it, if you were to rewind your life, you probably wouldn't have had any of those anxieties going on.
It definitely wouldn't have been as bad. Not
Yeah.
because I wouldn't be constantly worried, that constant worry about Armageddon. And then as I got older, because I was baptized when I was 12, the constant worry about not getting disfellowshipped, right? And having to be perfect all the time,
Oh my goodness. Now, so you got baptized, you got baptized at 12. Who was encouraging that?
In our congregation, it was the fad. There must have been 10 of us maybe who were in the same age group who got baptized in the same year. Yeah. So I'm assuming it was the elders were very encouraging. After we all got baptized, they threw us a big party. Yeah, that was just the thinking in that congregation. I don't know.
Yeah, that was called peer pressure. And if you weren't part of that group that got baptized and you were in the age group, you probably felt left out.
Yeah, there were a couple of kids whose parents said absolutely not, and those people didn't get baptized for some years. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and fast forward on to your adult life, because you were getting ready to talk about that and kind of talk about how this anxiety disorder continued. What were some of the other things that was happening?
Yeah, I ended up pioneering in my first year out of high school. Now, I did go to college. I don't know, a lot of people don't seem to remember, but somewhere in the 90s, there was like a little loosening of the rules, right? And the people who were in my age group, what we heard was like, okay, you can go to college, but you have to pioneer. So I had a lot of friends who were in school and pioneering, right? But of course, it's extremely difficult to be in school full time and then have to work a job to pay bills and then have to put at the time 90 hours and then 70 hours of field service. So I was completely burnt out. So I did that for about 7 years. And I had, in my seventh year, I was working full time as a teacher and pioneering, which required me to get up at like, I don't know, 5 in the morning, a couple days during the week to go out preaching early, go straight to work all day, go out preaching after work, right? And then Saturdays would come and I'd have to preach like a long day, 8-hour day, something like that on Saturdays to try to get these pioneer hours. It was actually crazy. I don't know how I did that.
I don't either. I mean, I'm just listening to you talk about going to school full time, and I was just doing 2 classes a semester when I was working full time. So you had a full load in college?
Yes. And I worked part-time, and then I was preaching in, I guess, every spare minute.
And the only thing that was different was you graduated from school, but your work as a pioneer you can never graduate from that.
Right. Yeah,
You know what I mean?
Right.
Now you said that you were a teacher. Now being one of Jehovah's Witnesses and being a teacher in a school, what grade were you teaching?
I was teaching elementary school.
Elementary, okay.
Yeah.
So now what was that like? Being a teacher and dealing with the flag salute and holidays?
Well, I was a Spanish teacher, so I didn't have to worry too much about that. But sometimes I did have to teach kids about the flags of different countries. Now, again, I've never been like, I wasn't the straight up witness, like for instance, if there was a birthday party with my colleagues, I'm going to eat some cake. Okay. Right. And if I had to teach these kids about the flags of a country and have them color it, you're going to color it. The only problem that I had was that I worked in one school district that had some witnesses in it. So every once in a while, their parents would call me, and be like, oh, well, my child can't, color this flag, blah, blah, blah.
Oh my goodness. Oh my, you got to be kidding. Now, let me say this. Okay. So now you said you were a Spanish teacher, but so when I'm thinking about being a teacher that starts off the morning with flag salute.
Yeah. No, I didn't.
You were one of the transfer students, one of the classes that they transferred to later in the day?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
So you didn't have that to deal with, but just think if you did have to deal with that, how would you have handled that?
Right. I mean, I would have had to just let the kids do the flag salute. And the kind of person I was, I would do it. To illustrate for you, when I left teaching public school, I went for 2 years to teach in a private school district. It was a non-public school district. And I had to teach in churches. And I just went right ahead and did it. I mean, I figured, well, I'm not teaching religious material. I was teaching math and reading. I didn't tell anyone at the Kingdom Hall, though. They might have had a different idea, but I needed to get paid.
You know what? And that is the smart move. And I think that the problem that we had as Jehovah's Witnesses, we told our business too much. People were always dipping in our business, trying to find out where we worked, how we were working, and stuff like that, to the point where then, oh, you can't work there.
Right. Because if you tell them, then they're going to have a problem with it.
Exactly.
Right.
So now we're fast forward. Now at this point, you're working as a teacher, right?
Right.
Are you married at this time? How was all this working out?
No, I was single at the time.
Okay.
And like I said, after about 7 years of pioneering, I was very burnt out. And I had a breakdown. I was extremely depressed. I had a major depressive episode. I ended up, I had off the summers. I didn't have to work in the summer. And I spent probably several weeks just in my apartment by myself. It was pretty bad. I was feeling suicidal. And I called a suicide hotline. And that ended up being really good for me. That's when I went to have therapy for myself for the first time. And it really helped me a lot, just talking to someone. And what I came out with after going to therapy for some time was that I needed to change something about my life. I didn't like my life. My life was very busy, but I was miserable, and I was miserable. I never liked preaching. I don't know how I kept it up for 7 years. I never liked it. Not one day. And I didn't like the doctrine. I just kept going because that's what I was supposed to do. I wasn't really a believer in paradise. I did not believe that the governing body was somehow specially anointed by God, but I was just going through the motions and I was miserable. And I had to give it up. And I did. I quit pioneering at that time.
Yeah, you went through a lot. And, when I think about what you're saying, and you mentioned that you called that suicide hotline, you're the first person that I've interviewed in the 8-9 years that I've been doing this that actually reached out to a suicide hotline. I've actually talked to a lot of people that actually tried to commit suicide. So for the people that's watching this video, I hope that they would do the same thing. And just a quick note, if you ever find yourself in a mental health crisis, we've left a link in the video description to professional resources that can help. So it's really good that you did, reach out and try to get some assistance. Did you ever talk to the people on the line about your involvement with the Jehovah's Witnesses?
I did not talk about that. I just I remember it was a man who answered the line. He was very warm. He was very understanding, and I was just telling him about how I was feeling in that moment, And I said to him, "I need medication. I need medication." Da, da," he listened to me, he listened to my story, and he said, "No, I think what you need to do is to talk to someone. That's what you need to do." And that's how he hooked me up with a therapist. Yeah. Yeah.
And then how did you unpack it with the therapist?
Well, I don't I talked a lot about my childhood with the therapist, and what I learned with her was that a lot of my depression was really based in repression because probably as you've caught on, I was just living a life that wasn't real. It wasn't really my life. And I was doing all that to keep other people happy, but I was actually really very angry at some of the people from my life, and I needed to talk about that, and I needed to start to distance myself from certain people, and I definitely needed to distance myself from the religion somewhat so that I could feel better.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And why do you think you didn't really believe? What made you feel? What was the first thing that you thought of, and how old were you when you felt that way?
I remember this. I was probably about 19. That's when I went to sign up to be a pioneer, and I don't know what it is like now, but then it was like a little white slip of paper, and you had to, like, check 2 little boxes, and one of the boxes was to check that you believe that the governing body is God's spokespeople on earth, and I remember thinking, "No," but I checked the box anyway because I wanted to pioneer, and the reason why I thought the governing body wasn't legitimate was because you remember at that time, they kept saying, "Oh, it's only 5 years till the end of the world," They used to tell us, "You're never gonna make it to high school. You're never gonna make it." Though then I had been in high school, now I'm in college, and then I'm thinking to myself, "Well, the governing body members and the anointed are creeping close to 100 years old now." And I
Mhm.
thought to myself, I thought, "I bet you that in a couple of years, they're gonna change this doctrine because, you know, these people are getting too old for the story." And then when they did change the doctrine, I was like, well, either I'm anointed or they're fake.
And then there's something how it was just that little form that you filled out to regular Pioneer that actually got you to thinking. And it's not until, because, like, you can talk about something all day long, right? But it's not until you see it in black and white that it really jumps off the page. And that's all it did. That just jumped off the page. And you're like, wait a minute. You started connecting those dots.
Right, exactly. Like it made you actually sign your name off on this idea, that these men, these random men, right, that I don't know personally are somehow specifically assigned by God to tell me what to do.
Mhm.
I don't think so.
Exactly. Now, when you were, dealing with that, okay, so at 19, you signed up to Pioneer, but previous to 19, as a, youngster, were you also having doubts before?
I wasn't having doubts before, but I had a lot of fear. I had really bad fears about demons, and I remember the people in my life, some of the adults would just feed into those fears. I remember one time I used to have a trouble with sleep paralysis, right? When you wake up and you just feel like you can't move.
Yep.
So what a person in my life said that I have to look around my room and see if I can find anything that's associated with demons because that's what it is. So I remember looking around my room and finding like some book, that had some magical elements and thinking, "Oh, that must be it. It must be, I have to throw this book away." And I used to be really scared at night about demons. And I think by the time I got to like 18, 19, I started to think to myself, are demons even real? You know,
Right.
or is this just made up?
I can relate to your story because I remember I think I was in what, second grade, I think maybe second or third grade, and my sister had a guy in her class, and they used to do seances, and he was telling my sister that they all were in the family trying to call back one of the dead relatives, and they all were doing a seance and they were holding hands, and all of a sudden somebody started choking his little sister. So then my mother told my sister the next time that happened to this person to have them yell, "Help me, Jehovah." And so the next time that they had the seance and it happened again, he yelled out, "Help me, Jehovah." And everybody in the family got mad because then the seance broke. Now, I don't know. I'm just telling you, this is what I remember for as a kid. Then one night I was laying in the bed and we had bunk beds and I was in the top bunk and I saw something white floating towards me. Now, this is a true story. And all of a sudden I just hollered, "Help me, Jehovah." Now, I don't know if that happened because, like subconsciously, my sister had told the story, but that actually was an experience that happened to me. And when I said, "Help me, Jehovah," boom, that thing went away. I have no idea. I don't need, and I mean, and that was my one and only experience. That was weird.
I
So
don't
at
know.
some point, I mean, so I don't even know. And this is the kind of stuff that we dealt with as kids in this religion.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
dealt with that kind of stuff, you know?
It just really sticks with you. I know, like on the internet, you don't hear witnesses talking about. We all heard a story about like a Smurf that somebody brought to the Kingdom Hall that was walking down the aisle. Like we grew up thinking this stuff was real.
I mean, I'm surprised that I didn't have a complex because I was that scary little kid. But I think it's because my mother didn't really play into that. And also it was a one and done that happened. And it probably happened because it was around the same time my sister was having that experience with the guy in her class, you know. But if it
Yeah.
would have been something that would have been constantly, like make sure, you don't do this, you don't do that, demons here, demons there. I was a little older when the Smurfs started coming along, but I remember those little blue Smurfs. I remember them talking
Yeah.
about it, you know.
A little
That is
demonic.
so crazy. So let me ask you this. So you pioneered and you didn't like going out and field stuff. You didn't like preaching as where what was it like with your people, like going out and field service with other people in the congregation? What did that look like? Pioneering.
Well, I mean, I was in the Spanish speaking congregation for quite a while. So that's probably a little different than being in an English speaking congregation because we spent a lot of time driving around in the car. We would drive for miles and miles, And I think one thing that I constantly didn't like was that there was always a lot of gossip in the car. It was always sisters talking about other people's business. And as I got older and older, it really started to just weigh me down. I got tired of getting in the car and people saying, "Oh, did you hear about Sister So and so's daughter and what she did?" And, "Oh, did you know so and so's disfellowship?" It just started to feel very negative, after a while.
Well, it's like that in English too.
Yeah,
In
it
the
even
English congregation. I
worse
mean,
English.
like so were you Spanish congregation before you got married?
Yes.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you saw the Spanish congregation, and so then how long were you in Spanish?
I was in the Spanish for 8 years. Yep.
That's a
Which
long time.
it was a
Yeah.
long time. It was a nice experience and then it was a not nice experience. I will say in the area that we're in, I wouldn't put this on all Spanish congregations, but there was colorism, there was racism. That was not lost on me. I had people say some things to me that were very not nice, about Black people. That also started to wear on me. But on the flip side, it was, a very nice culture. I got to learn about a whole different, set of people. I got to learn about new food, speak a new language, make some friends there. That was good. When it came to field service, the sisters in the Spanish congregation were much more deferential to the brothers. They followed the rules, they listened a whole lot. You know, um, it was very different when I was pioneering in the English speaking congregation, where like the sisters were kind of like trying to be in charge, fighting with each other. outright fighting with each other, you know, like if this one's going to be in the Kingdom Hall today, I'm not going to go to the Kingdom Hall, stuff like that. So it was a
Oh
bit of
my
a
goodness. So you saw the good and the bad in both
right.
different congregations, different cultures. But
Yeah.
the cultures were different because you were saying that the Spanish sisters were more like submissive
Yep.
than the
Much, much
ones in English. And you're in your area.
in our area. Right. And
Okay.
that's it's really, you know, because it could be something could be totally different, just, I don't know,
Mhm.
50 miles north, you know, or south.
Right.
Yeah.
What you just heard was only the beginning. In the next episode of Hidden Struggles, Maya shares what life was really like as an elder's wife. Maya is a licensed clinical social worker who helps professionals break free from anxiety, depression, and self-doubt. More details about her practice are in the description. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode.